what's been your most fascinating discovery, Megan? But what's been the thing that sort of stood out from everything that you've done and everything you've seen and everything you've researched that's really made you think, oh, this could change everything?
Well, I mean, one of the things that we're studying at the moment is looking at food additives. So if we think about our food supply, there's around 400 or so food additives that have been proved as safe, right? So when we look at the safety data, it was done about 50 or so years ago, that then allowed food industry to start putting them in our food supply. But that, of course, was before we understood about the importance of our gut microbiome. Like I mentioned at the start, it's only been this technology that's allowed us to then, sequence these microbes, i.e. look at who's there and what they're doing. So we've only started to appreciate their importance. So actually, we're starting to do a retesting of these food additives. And there are some groups of food additives that some of the preliminary data coming out suggesting that actually might be really harmful for a lot of people's gut health. And some of these foods are in some of these food additives are in 30% of the foods that we regularly consume. So I think for me, that's kind of a bit of oh my goodness, we need to really look at what we've kind of done in the food industry in terms of adding all these things in, thinking, oh, it's going to help with the shelf life. Oh, it's going to help with the mouth and the feel and the texture and stuff like that. But actually, we've kind of need to realize that we can't necessarily have our cake and eat it too. There's probably some consequences of this. Now, I don't want to scare people and go, oh my God, you can't eat any processed foods with all these food additives in it. It's likely to be a dose dependent effect, but I think it certainly is something that we should start to think about. And, that brings me to, I guess, I highlighted about we don't need to just have plants only. And I think there was a bit of a trend for a while that going vegan was a healthy thing to do. And I understand for animal cruelty, religious reasons, environmental reasons why someone would want to do that. But in terms of health, actually, it's not necessarily the healthiest thing to do. We know you need to take extra supplements like omega-3 supplements as well, because you're not getting things like your oily fish. And we know omega-3 is really important for not just our gut health, but our mental health and all that sort of stuff. But also a lot of these vegan fast foods coming to the forefront, like vegan sausage rolls and even these vegan patties, actually, they've got loads of these food additives in them to kind of replace that mouthfeel that we would have gotten from actual animal meat. So I think we just need to be really careful about, some of these convenient foods that we think, hey, it's plants, it must be healthy. But actually that processing, could be having negative impacts on our health.
And also, how confusing is it when it calls itself a vegan sausage roll? Why can't it just be a vegan roll? I'm completely perplexed by that, but that's a whole other conversation. Can we talk about this gut piece being your second brain and how it's taken so long for people to wake up to its importance as an organ in your body and the job that it does for you? Because possibly maybe it's because it's not as sexy as some of the other stuff that happens and goes on in your system, but it feels like as the second brain, it plays a really pivotal role. I mean, just tell us a little bit about that and why people refer it to it as the second brain.
Yeah, look, Georgie, I think most of us, have experienced that second brain, our day-to-day lives. If we are nervous or excited, we might have the butterflies in our tummy, right? And that is the thoughts up here, literally innovating and making our gut feel a certain way. So we've known about this gut-brain axis. So essentially this two-way communication. So you're thinking things up here, it can impact your gut. Things that are happening in your gut can impact your brain. So that two-way communication, we call it the gut-brain axis. We've known about it for quite some time. But I think it's been a case, again, good old technology. We've now, I guess, been able to understand more about that mechanism. So there's, these hundreds of millions of nerves. It's called the enteric nervous system. A lot of people have heard of things like the vagus nerve. That's part of that system. And I think we've now really been able to kind of scan this and understand more of how that is actually connected. And that's now, given people more, I guess, understanding that it's not just this hippy dippy woo-ha thing. We actually have some scientific literature to show that, targeting this, particularly those who actually have gut symptoms, targeting this independent of diet actually can have huge relief on people's digestive symptoms. But also, I guess there's that new key player to this gut-brain communication, and that is those gut microbes, where actually we've now seen that they are able to produce a lot of different chemicals. And how they do that, particularly, is when we eat the plant. So we talked about why plants are so important. They essentially feed our gut bacteria. And there's a specific nutrient in plants that is our gut microbes' favorite food. Georgie, come on, show me how smart you are. What is that nutrient that is fertilizer for our gut bacteria?
I'm not even going to go there. What is it?
It's fiber. It's fiber.
Oh, there we go.
So, we all hear we're not getting enough fiber.
Yeah.
That simple thing the government's always like, eat more blah. But I guess, we didn't really understand why it was healthy before, but now we appreciate that actually human cells can't digest fiber. So it actually goes through most of our 9-meter digestive tract undigested, and it gets into that last final part of the intestine where we have most of our gut microbiome. So usually live in the last 1.5 meters. And they are the ones who have the enzymes to digest and break down the fiber and then produce these chemicals, many of which then, go and talk to our appetite. Some of them are thought to pass that blood-brain barrier and then impact our brain. So I guess it's this new understanding again of the fact that actually these microorganisms in our gut can actually have a communication impact of our brain that also has kind of started to elevate this gut-brain axis and this communication and the reason why I guess we're starting to think, okay, there is a legit connection going on here. We need to target both ends.
Yeah, and why we get so many gut feelings about things, I suspect. What about stress as well, and the part that stress has, the role that stress has to play on gut health? How big a problem is that for gut health? I mean, so many of us are living these ridiculously fast-paced lives where, on your very quiz, there were various different categories of how you could answer how stressed you are on the basis of a month. And one was sort of every week, one was 1 to 2 weeks of the month. And I was like, I can't even think beyond every week. It's every day, maybe. And that's how most of us are living our lives. So how big a problem is that for our gut?
Yeah, it's huge, to be honest. And I think this is probably why, in particular, gut health symptoms are on the rise, is because we are just constantly bombarded, right? Like, even if you think about athletes, before they just used to go to training, then they come home, rest, just chill out. But now they have to go and do their own podcast. They have to go on and do things on Instagram. Same with you, Georgie, in terms of, historically, if you're a presenter, you would just be on TV, come home, prep, do some script writing. But now you need to be doing all these other things. So you constantly go, go, go. And what happens is being constantly go, go, go up here literally means that those hundreds of millions of nerves that innervate your gut are like these loose wires. So they're constantly feeding into the gut and therefore making the gut hypersensitive and therefore more likely to get these digestive symptoms. So yeah, it is a really big issue. And certainly when I am, managing someone who's got one of these gut symptoms, we do dietary elements as well, because obviously giving the gut a bit of rest is something that we do, but I always make sure we target this up here as well. It's like this two-pronged approach to really sorting out these digestive issues.
And if you're going through the menopause, I mean, that screws up so many different things. I mean, does that have implications too?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So our microbes are really important actually in estrogen metabolism, because there's this collection of these microbes called the estrobolome. And what they do is help recycle estrogen. So when the estrogen is old, it gets into our gut to kind of poop it out. But actually we've got these certain types of microbes that can help turn it back into the active form, and then we reabsorb it. So there's a whole wealth of research coming to the forefront highlighting that if you really look after your gut health, particularly going through perimenopause, you can actually reduce a lot of the symptoms like hot flushes, and various other ones, as well as if you go even earlier in terms of before you get into the perimenopause, actually they've shown that nourishing your gut health can delay the natural menopause by, I think it was about 3 or so years. So, these sorts of things, if you can get in early, but again, it's never too late. So we're starting to, I guess, appreciate why our gut is like this super organ that we never really appreciate the importance of, or we didn't know who was there. But we're like, actually, this is like a super weapon if we want to not only, live healthier now, but also into the future. then looking after this little super weapon is incredibly important.
You mentioned a moment ago about athletes. When you were supporting as a nutritionist that sports team in Oz, what was your big takeaway from that? What was your big learner of what athletes did that actually we can all pick up the best bits of?
Yeah, look, so it was the synchronized swimming girls, so the Olympic synchronized swimming girls, which was a really great opportunity, I guess, for me. And that's what led me to want to do my PhD, is that I was looking after them, but also I was working as a clinical dietitian in the hospital setting. So I was actually seeing, you know, very different groups of people. So really sick people, whether it was like kidney disease, heart disease in hospital setting, all these elite athletes, yet both groups were coming to me complaining of the gut. And that was just a couple of years after I'd lost my grandma to bowel cancer. And I was like, God, this gut is this awful organ. It's causing, you know, elite athletes to have issues, very sick people. And that's when I was like, you know what, it was 2010. So it was kind of early stages in gut health. And that's when I was like, you know what, I need to find out more. And that's when I decided to do my PhD, literally throw away those fun years of my 20s to doing poop samples in the lab. But it was certainly worthwhile. But, you know, it was that experience. And so working with the synchro girls was really fascinating. I mean, you just see how dedicated athletes are, right? In terms of they're so strict with their regimes, but also that they are under incredible pressure. So like I said, a lot of them were actually having quite severe digestive symptoms because their training schedule, you know, was so intense, not only physically, but also mentally. You know, they had a lot of them, you know, still had to have a part-time job as well, because, you know, synchro was obviously not a sport that pays a whole lot. So even though they were, you know, going to the Olympics, they were still having to like juggle so much stuff. So, and obviously being in a very tight leotard, you can't really be looking like you're 6 months pregnant with some IBS, can you? So yeah, I mean, I learned a lot from them in terms of, you know, the amazing kind of dedication that it takes. But also, I guess, the importance of, you know, looking after this if you want to be, you know, at your best performing athletically as well. And, you know, there's a whole lot of research that's coming out there now showing that athletes, particularly high performing athletes, seem to have, you know, some specific types of gut microbes, which actually make them better, you know, in whatever sport that they're excelling in. So they looked at marathon runners and they showed that, you know, the top Boston Marathon runners actually contained certain types of bacteria that metabolize the lactic acid. And turned it into energy to make them refuel and be able to go faster and longer. So you can imagine now probiotic companies are like, we need that bacteria to then give everyone so we can all be more better athletes. So that's, I think, where we'll end up heading, but still early days. So there's sadly no probiotic out there at the moment, which will, you know, give you better endurance. But that's the sort of stuff that they're starting to look at.
That's insane. Let's just unpack that a minute. So they've discovered that sometimes in someone's makeup, there is something in their microbiome which is allowing them to excel at the thing that they end up doing to a really, really high standard in terms of a sport. That's absolutely crazy, isn't it? And that's not is that a genetic thing, or is it a geographical thing? I mean, what is the reason that they're attributing that to at the moment? I know that, like you say, it's in early stages, but that's just fascinating.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we don't really know. We certainly see that in terms of the types of bacteria we have in our gut there is a genetic component. So obviously when we are, if we're birthed vaginally, we actually take a lot of the microorganisms from our mum initially, but then also the environment, you know, do we have a pet at home? Those sorts of things, you know, do we have an older sibling? All those sorts of things, the diet that we're on, breast milk, you know, buttermilk, all that sort of stuff dictates the types of microbes we've got in our gut. So in terms of the study that I mentioned about the lactic acid types of microorganisms, they actually don't know at this stage. Is it a chicken and the egg? Is it the case that these athletes have, worked so hard, at refining their microbiome, and therefore the microbes that are able to, metabolize that lactic acid have grown and really dominated? Or actually are they that just happen to have picked up that, and therefore that has really helped them, win all the races, and then it's kind of the survival of the fittest? Hopefully we'll know in a few more years.
It's really interesting. I wonder how long human performance coaches within these elite sports teams have known about this and have cultivated it accordingly to create those marginal gains, because it's an absolute no-brainer, isn't it? I mean, I'm sure they prescribe good eating and healthy diets, but that takes it to just this notch up, doesn't it? Is the difference between being brilliant and being absolutely, unbreakable.
Yeah, I mean, but they might even start in the future, because there has been quite a lot of papers published on this looking at is that going to be doping, right? So sports doping, because if you're taking specific types of microorganisms, or even getting a fecal transplant, which is literally taking the poop samples of someone who's amazing at a sport and transplanting it into someone else. Now that, Georgie, you know what? You're going to laugh at me. But
oh my God,
fecal transplants actually save thousands of lives every year.
What?
So these happen in all kind of major hospitals. Yeah. So for people who've got C. difficile, so this gut infection, if they don't respond to antibiotics, then having this fecal transplant, they've been doing it for many, many years. So taking the poop from a healthy person into this person who's got this gut infection that's really life-threatening, that's got a cure rate of about 95%, which is just mind-blowing. So now they're starting to look at fecal transplants in all other conditions, including things like IBS. So yeah, that's a whole other conversation. I think I know we're probably going to run out of time, but so thinking about athletes, could this then be like doping, because you're actually transplanting something or giving something that competitive edge via some sort of supplement or drug, microbiome drug. So yeah, I think the sports arena is really going to be in quite a state of having to make these decisions maybe for the next Olympics.
Megan, I can't believe this. You're the only person I can possibly imagine that can link poo with performance, but you've done it.
No, but it's a legit thing. I mean, you think about also athletes, because they're so run down, their immune system's often compromised. So they have done studies looking at some specific probiotics of giving them to athletes and reducing things like, their ability to, their resilience to things like the common cold and stuff like that. So there is a space in performance for things like probiotics. But yeah, I think the fecal samples is probably still early stages. So if any of the coaches are listening to this, I wouldn't recommend doing it. Getting your top athlete
they're
to
all
transplant it.
Any marginal gain, they're all over that, I'm telling you. It feels really ridiculous now to ask you about an everyday performance tip when we've just had this sort of groundbreaking conversation about poo and performance. But I'm going to do it anyway. If people other than sports coaches are listening to this conversation, or indeed sports coaches, what is something that you've picked up in your personal and professional opinion that can really help people in terms of better everyday performance?
Yeah, look, I think one, for those with digestive symptoms, and I think it's, important that we separate out these people, because the recommendations are always going to be that little bit different. I would say doing, 10 minutes of some sort of mindfulness if you are having digestive symptoms, because like I said, there is a whole lot of these thoughts strangling the gut. So you may find that 10 minutes of doing things like the diaphragmatic breathing, all that sort of stuff, really does relax those live wires that are feeding between your brain and your gut. So 10 minutes, I would say, if you can do that, that could, have quite significant improvements in your digestive symptoms. And then for people who don't have those kind of acute symptoms, I would say thinking about how you can, literally, as boring as it is, adding an extra plant into your diet each day. It might be a case of you're having porridge, literally grating in some carrot or grating in some courgette, little things like that. Think of it as being like a fertilizer for this little inner community that can be a game changer. If we look at a lot of CEOs and stuff like that, I wonder if there is some sort of magical microbiome that they have that could be leading, them to performing that little bit higher. We certainly, they're certainly starting to look at stuff like that. So thinking about how you can add an extra plant into your diet, I would say, sounds like a very simple thing, but, science is suggesting it can be far-reaching.
I think you got your next study paper determined. That's the most important thing. Brilliant. Megan, thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's been really fascinating.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.